Yeah, I was in a hurry there. So Sbu, I've already posed the question. So we are inviting you to share with us about what happened during these past 3 months with the shack dwellers in eThekwini, but we know that this is not just something that has been happening in your municipality, it's been happening in other areas as well. And perhaps you could share from where you are sitting, what led to these illegal evictions and demolition of people's homes. And Sbu.
Hi. Thank you so much, Tembela, and thank you to Ubumbano for providing this space for us. It is very important. Well, the evictions have been very worrying since the first day of the national lockdown at the end of March this year. We have been facing brutal and unlawful evictions in many communities here in Durban, but we also know that evictions have not only been taking place in Durban, we are seeing it in Ekurhuleni because we have presence also in the area. They've been taking place in Cape Town and in Port Elizabeth also. Most of the metros are really facing this, but in Abahlali communities, it's been very disturbing given the fact that the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services have actually made a call that all evictions should stop during the during this period of the national lockdown. Not only the minister, but also the UN Special Rapporteur on the Adequacy of Housing has also issued a worldwide ban on evictions. So the evictions that we've been facing have actually led people who are vulnerable, homeless. You would recall that people who are living in the informal settlements are finding it difficult to observe social distance, but also to keep washing their hands or promote this hygiene that is required by government in order to flatten the spread of the curve of the coronavirus. So we were caught in the middle of a difficult battle when we had to educate our communities around the issues of hygiene, but also acknowledging that people have hardly any access to water and sanitation during this time. And of course, that they are unable to comply with these regulations, particularly the keeping of social distance, given the overcrowding conditions in which they are subjected to. So the eThekwini municipality's anti-land invasion units, together with Calvin and Family Security, have been instructed to attack Abahlali on a number of occasions, demolishing their homes. These are homes that have been well established. People have occupied these homes for the past year and above. So unfortunately, out of nowhere, the city has just approached the Ekenana community, just to mention the few. Ekenana community, Azania community, Eguphumeleleni communities have been targeted. Now, we think the municipality wants to show that they are actually the Republic of eThekwini, if you don't want to call it Republic of KwaZulu-Natal. Because, I mean, if the national government, the National Command Center has issued directive that the evictions must stop at this time, and they continue, that it shows that they act outside the mandate of the South African government. Hence, we think that they are law unto themselves, but they are a country on their own. They have their own laws and regulations. So these communities have been facing brutal eviction to an extent that a number of comrades have been seriously injured during these evictions. Many have been hospitalized. Some have also been admitted, in the intensive care units. That's the extent of the seriousness of the injuries that they've been facing. But there has been one particular case where Yamgela, one of the housing activists in eKenana, was shot by Mr. Mkize of the land inversion unit of eThekwini. Yamgela was rushed to hospital. He was actually admitted at the ICU. During the day at which he was shot, we were in Durban High Court we had brought in the agent application to interdict the city from evicting people. So while we were in court and while the court was ruling that the eThekwini's conduct is unlawful and they should stop, in fact, we got this interdict. So while we were receiving interdict from Durban High Court, the land inversion unit led by Mr. Mkize was continuing to demolish homes in eKenana, and Yamgela was shot not by rubber bullets, he was shot by live ammunition. That amounts to attempted murder. So an attempted murder case was opened with Katumena police station. And of course, it was not easy to have that case open. We had to, ask the intervention of SERI, we had to phone the high management of the police station in order for them to open the case. They actually refused to open the case, despite community having, cartridges, as an evidence to say this was the live ammunition that was discharged. So they refused to accept the evidence that was picked up on the floor. So eKenana has become, so as the Azania and Eguphumeleni, they have actually become a war zone during this time. So all of this was reported to all levels of the organs of state. And I had an opportunity to meet with Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, the Minister of Human Settlement, Water and Sanitation. And I actually shared this, raised concerns, asked for her intervention. And she would always say to me, well, Sbu, I have spoken to eThekwini, I've written to them, they are going to stop, these evictions because we had an ongoing meeting of the sector with the National Department of Human Settlement. So it was a very difficult moment for me. While on the other side, the eThekwini is killing Abahlali on the one hand, and the trust was really difficult to say, can we really trust government on this? On the one hand, we are trying to negotiate, but also we want to establish a long-lasting relationship that will go beyond COVID-19 national lockdown. So this is what we've been doing. So of course, these meetings, on the one hand, they did bear fruit to an extent that some of our communities were provided with water tanks, as this was an agent, attempt by government to actually provide water tanks on the informal settlement. So the evictions have not only left people homeless, but women in particular. There was a moment also during the same period where at least 30 women of Azania were arrested, and they were actually, they were traumatized. They were assaulted at the police station. So their arrests had they had no reason to arrest them other than to say these women had actually contravened the national regulations, when in fact they were just lying down on their homes that were already demolished at the Azania settlement. So, and then they were just arrested, sent to Katumena police station, but then the police couldn't charge them because if you ask them, they said, well, you've contravened the national regulations, but they still couldn't find a tangible case that they could charge them on. But then they forced them to sign a consent that they would not return to the settlement. In order for them to be released at the police station, the police threatened them to actually consent to sign an agreement that they are not going to return back. And the women, to our surprise, they were very courageous. In fact, what they said to police, you better arrest them because in no ways will abandon our homes. Those are our homes. So if you want to force us not going back to our homes, you may as well arrest and charge us. So, I mean, in the middle of the night, we had to pull our legal advisors from Seri to say, what do we do? But on the one hand, we're also encouraged by the courage that the women had. They actually chose to be charged and sleep over in those cells instead of really consenting that they are not going to return to their home. So this is how the women of Tanzania, were facing this. But each time these evictions are taking place, it happens in the broad daylight in the presence of the children. So many children in particular have been traumatized. This is the extent, and of course, this is the impact of these evictions. They are not just leaving people homeless, destitute in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, but children are witnessing the exchange of gunshots, as you will see the gang fight in somewhere in Cape Town. So this is unacceptable. So we are lucky that we have journeyed with a number of comrades and partners over the years. Churchland program was not just looking at that, but they have always been around to say, how do we walk side by side to support you? And eventually, Churchland programs intervention was really amazing for Abahlali, that they were able to have this strategic approach of really getting to the bottom of the story. I'm sure David is yet to share that.
Wow, thanks, Boo, for that. This is actually, I mean, it's causing shivers in my body listening to you about what you've been experiencing. It's actually one of those things that I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think in my mind, what kind of a government does this to its own people, a government that leads by instilling fear on people, forcing people to sign, and threatening them, and I think you've already mentioned quite a lot of things in terms of how these illegal evictions have actually impacted on people, the psychological impact. You've talked about that, but also this being done in front of children as well. I'm not sure, perhaps whether I could also invite David to also share, working alongside what they have seen in terms of the impact of these evictions. David, I don't know whether you want to jump in there and add perhaps some points that you might have.
Okay. Again, greetings, comrades. Yes, as Churchland program, it got to a point where we could not just take this as another report that there are evictions in settlement X or in settlement Y, which has happened a number of times. We deliberated in the office that this is not on. This time in particular, it's not on because people are instructed to stay indoors because there is a virus that is killing people. So everyone must be indoors. People must give up their hustle activities. People must not visit their families. They must be indoors. Now, here comes an organ of the state. Unbelievable and ununderstandable contradiction you can ever have in any country, that you have pronouncements made at a national level at an international level that are forcing people to be secured by being in their homes. Now here comes a local organ of the state throwing people out of their homes, making them vulnerable to be eaten up by this virus. Now that was a big thing for us, that you can't have this. That's just one thing. And then we thought, again, because we are not legal experts, we cannot argue the legalities that the state can bring forth as the reason to do this or justify their actions. And we said, but from a humanitarian point of view, you can't behave like a savage animal to people that you call your own. This is not human. Not be tolerant. One's silence on this is actually complacence, that it should go on. So as Churchland program, we said, no, it can't be. It can't be. On one hand, when Abahlali are faced by such attacks, they will converge and take to the street, or converge and go down to the city hall or whichever authority, the ward council, and they have their hands behind their backs tied, so that now anyone can come and beat them up as they want, because you are scaring them with the army and police as part of prohibiting people from gathering and from converging, so that they can take forward their plight. So you deny them that right, and then you let loose your wildest animals in the form of eThekwini municipality to rip them apart. We thought this is not on.
The words that you are using there, I mean, it actually raises it raises a lot of questions, and I think one of the things that you are raising, David, is this state, like the contradictions within the state. On one hand, you have certain organs of the state saying this, and then you have the other ones doing something that is totally different from what has already been declared elsewhere. And you know, I actually think the kind of words that you are using there deserve, you know, like to be said about what you're talking about, because this is a time when people's lives are endangered anyway, and you actually move people from their homes and throw them outside so that they are even more vulnerable. And it begs a question, I think, in my mind as to what is actually happening in this country. And this is not a question to you, Sbu and David. I think it's just a question that I want to throw out there that perhaps we can bring up when we go into the discussion as to what is actually happening here, where a state actually makes its people even more vulnerable. And yeah, so I know you're saying, Dav, you couldn't just sit there and not do anything. Otherwise, it means you're actually part of the problem yourselves too. But I think before I come to you, I just want to go back to SBU. SBU, you've already mentioned that organizations like CLP and SERI stood by you during this time. And I think the question from us is, when you go through such difficult times, and when you're trying to make your voices heard, and I think David is actually talking about how your hands were tied behind your back, and of course it doesn't necessarily mean you are not doing anything, but like you're actually acting. And I think that these are times where you need others to actually stand by you and show solidarity. And I think the question for us is, under such circumstances, what are your expectations as a movement and the Sheikh Dwellers from those who want to stand in solidarity? And I think the question there is, how should they act in such a way that they do not further silence you, but actually still make a show solidarity in a way that will still make sure that your voice is being heard? So what does solidarity look like under
Thank you so much,
circumstances?
Tabela, for that question. I think it's a very crucial question because we've seen a number of organizations and individuals who are really oppressing people in the name of help, support, solidarity. We've seen, comrades and progressive organizations also in the name of help are suppressing the very same voice that is trying to emerge. So hence your question becomes so important to us. So what we expect from solidarity partners is exactly the gesture of solidarity that CLP has demonstrated. One, we need organization to be very respectful in the manner that they approach grassroots organization, because we are very sensitive, we are very cautious also of how struggles are hijacked but undermined and so on. So the approach has to be respectful. You have to respect the organization that you want to support. Abahlali talks more about, the question of dignity. We want to respect, and we expect people to respect us. How one respects us is to engage whatever needs to be, whatever is proposed, as a solution. I mean, like Churchland program will come up with these ideas, but under no circumstances they are going to discuss and conclude on their own. They will throw these ideas as proposal to say, this is what we think clearly should, this is how we think we should approach this particular problem. We expect organization to condemn any violence. That our country is right now facing gender-based violence. And I don't think there's enough voice that is actually out there to condemn these acts of violence. That comes in multiple forms. It's not just gender-based violence. We've seen migrant communities being attacked through xenophobia and so on. We've seen LGBTI communities and so on. And in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, there is political violence, leaders are assassinated. And we say we have a duty as civil society organization, as activists, to speak out against any form of violence. Because again, silence comes with its own consequences, as David was mentioning. So we will expect comrades to actually, to be creative. The one approach that CLP has done has really been very creative in terms of their response. There are suggestions that I've also put into place by church leaders, for instance, having press conferences, because you cannot just keep quiet when your humanity is dragged. You simply cannot keep quiet when people like Bulelani Xolani in Cape Town, for instance, of his dignity and his view. So, then we have a serious problem when people are really silenced. But go out in the media, write your articles, express these outrageous, situations that one observes. So that's, and of course, help us to strengthen our voice. And that's what's the actually help us to strengthen our voice. There's a number of ways to do this. One of these ways is to empower Abahlali through making the information available, and for us also to be creative. How do we make use of this information as it has done, but also provide us with some experts and of course some professional advice and scientific solutions if there are any, because everyone has a role. We have our own weaknesses, and your strength could be our weaknesses, and our weaknesses could be, so if we come together, so we believe in solidarity in action. We would appreciate any solidarity that can actually empower us to actually address these issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Sbu, for that. I mean, this is actually quite helpful, because I know that sometimes people look at things that are happening and they're actually not sure whether they should act or they shouldn't. So the issue is not to say you cannot act. In fact, if anything, you're saying, yes, you must act, you must speak up, but there's a particular way of doing this. Do it with respect. You also can't just do it on your own without engaging the people that are directly affected. And of course, I think what I'm taking from what you're saying is that also it's not like you come with solutions. I'm coming with proposals that are then discussed with you so that you move together. And then perhaps I can come back to you, David. So for you, I mean, listening to what Sbu has been saying, if you think about the past 3 months, how would you say, for instance, you've actually done this? How did you show solidarity as Abahlali and the Shekdollahs were actually going through this siege from their own government? So how did this look like for you during this time? I mean, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the question. I think where it starts from us as activists in the Churchland program, feeling or understanding or appreciating the frustration, the anger, the pain that Abahlali are going through. In other words, appreciating that this is a real life crisis, this is a real life war, if one wants to use those words, where elites protected by states organ have the power to launch this war on the poor. First of all, we must appreciate that and understand how difficult it is for Abahlali, Mjondolo, and other groups that are dehumanized, what it is and how it feels to live under such circumstances. I think that's where it starts, because it then invites one's humanity to wake up and one's conscience to wake up, so that any intervention from there onwards is not just a requirement or an academic maybe exercise to go and find out what happened, write a report and throw it there or what have you. But it becomes a human endeavor to participate in a war for justice. I think that's where it starts. Now, if that is what we are going to do, you are then forced to follow and understand the lead of those who are feeling this pain, who are angered by this, who are brutalized by this, because it is them who will most likely understand and actually share some of the ways in which they want to get out of this mess. So as Churchland program, then it is imperative for us to respect the experience and the leadership demonstrated by Sheikh dwellers, and respect the knowledge that through their engagements and through being schooled by this hard experience, they produce. For us, that's very key. So in so doing, then, the past 6 months locates itself in that kind of a framework where we know that even if we can be an NGO that can be surrounded by or be able to summon resources, but we are not the leaders of the struggle. And we are not the ones who will have sleepless nights worried about our homes risking to be demolished, or our children risking to have no home or have their books scattered all over and their IDs or birth certificate scattered all over. We're not those ones. So our support then means let's subject ourselves to the organizing and the organization, the leadership, the knowledge that is produced in this war zone by Sheikh dwellers formations and others that we always come across. That's in a nutshell, the way in which CLP operates, and that then has manifested itself during the past 3 months of a lockdown where Abahlali were continuously attacked in the form of their homes being demolished and whatnot. So what SBU defines as what they expect from supporting NGOs, I think it sits well with us, because it actually should be the the prerequisite of engaging social formations than flying over them and bring solutions that may not even be useful in dealing with their crisis. Maybe I can end for now.
Wow. I'm actually picking up some important things, naming, I think one of the things that you're talking about is that whole thing of appreciating the anger and the frustrations. And I actually think, and perhaps again in the discussion, we can come back to that, because I think for me, there is a question there as to how to get into that discipline whilst you are not directly involved in the struggle, but you get to a point where you can actually appreciate the frustration, the anger, the brokenness, of people that are involved in struggle. So I think there's a question there, Dav, that I wish you could actually answer, how to get into that point. But I think the other thing that you're mentioning is you are not involved in the struggle. You are not the ones whose children's books are being thrown all over, and therefore you cannot lead. And you subject yourselves to the leadership of those that are involved, like in this war zone. And the other question I want to raise for you there, to you there, is being in solidarity in that way, what does it demand from you as practitioners? Because a lot of organizations, as Smu was saying earlier, that a lot of organizations come in the name of helping, but they actually end up hijacking the struggles of people and therefore further silencing them. So to be able to show solidarity and work in this way, what does it demand from you as practitioners?
Well, I'm sure there are many answers that others can think of, but what I'll mention for now is that, first of all, to deal with the first two questions, is that we need to realize that conditions under which Sheikh dwellers live and the attacks that they always encounter are actually pointing to one, I think, big thing. That is, humanity is under attack. Now, that as a starting point, then will not allow one who is concerned with justice, who is concerned with liberation, who is concerned with freedom for all people, no matter where they are, no matter how they are, color and age and whatnot, status, the class. It will not allow them to keep quiet, because their humanity as Sheikh dwellers, it is my humanity as well. And that is the fundamentals of being a person in the world. I don't want to just confine it to say it's a fundamental of being an African where we talk of Ubuntu. No, I know it is a human and worldwide problem that humanity, as we speak, is under attack. So that is one thing that then brought us as CLP to wanting to stand up. We have 15 years of relationship with Abahlali. One of the things also that I can say in answering, I think it will be the second question, is that you learn over time how to work with formations of the poor. There is no book written. If there are books, there are still few, and I think more should be written for those who want to really think about this and put it out there in the world books. But there is no ready-made product, that's what I'm trying to say. So you learn over time, learn with activists on how to walk their journey. Now that means there are times where you may initiate meetings to want to engage on certain issues, but most of the time you will sit in their midst, so that it then helps you to look for ways in which solidarity it's almost as if we work in a way that makes us invisible in the picture, yet we are there because we engage so often directly where shack dwellers are, and when they take their fight to other places in public spaces, we're not the ones who determine the terms of taking the fight to public spaces. We're not the ones who will say, hey, now it's time for you guys to protest for water. We will give you buses, come and protest. Or it's time for you to protest for housing, we'll give you. No, we work in a way that those things that they decide to do, we engage and then all look for resources to make sure that they get to where they want to be. Yeah.
Wow. I kind of feel like I want to also hear from Sbu, because I mean this is actually quite a difficult dance to do, and at the same time, I mean because as you say, David, it's not like there's a book that tells you that this is how you should actually stand in solidarity with people that are in struggle, but also at the same time, Abahlali, for instance, could easily say we don't want to work with you, and I actually wonder on your side, Sbu, what is it that we could actually here, I mean, learn from this, because again, I know I have worked in organizations like CLP. It is always such a difficult balance to keep in such a way that you don't overstep, you know, your boundaries. So, and I'm actually wondering from people that live these experiences on a daily basis. I'm actually not sure how to put this question, but like for this relationship to work, it needs both sides. What is it, for instance, on your side, Sbu, like for organizations like yours that needs to be there to help people know that yes, you can come, but like in our own terms. I don't know whether there are insights that you want to bring there, perhaps to add on what David was saying.
Yes, well, for me,
Yes, Sbu, you are on. You are unmute, Sbu.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. Well, the secret of this is that both parties need to be humble. It needs great ability. It needs maturity. What is it that we want? How are we going to achieve what we want? It requires someone that is selfish, one that acknowledges that it may be a struggle, but I cannot do without others. It will only succeed in relation to involving others. So our journey, of course, with CLP has been amazing. We've learned so much from, they've learned so much from us, and for sure we've learned so much from them. So to find that balance, I think it's a matter of leaders, if I was addressing the leaders, to say, know your constituents, know the people that you lead. So, because if you know the people that you lead, you will know what they want, and of course, in conversation with them. So I think CLP having been part of the journey with Abahlali, they begin to excel on their support and solidarity because they tend to understand now. This comes from a day-to-day experiences through, there were difficult moments that we have collectively been able to achieve, some of these challenges. So really, in short, I would say each party needs to know its story and it needs to embrace others. And of course, if you are really wanting to help, you just make sure that in the name of that help, you are not helping yourself. you are actually amplifying the very same voice that is already trying to emerge. So, and of course, the sense of responsibility, I mean, we all have duties and responsibility, and I think one of that, David has so profoundly spoke about, you know, this sense of deep humanity. So I think if we only guide against really leaving others behind, we are in, we would be heading to a right direction if we define humanity in relation to others. And acknowledging that you are highly unlikely to win without, you know, the support or inviting others. So we know our weaknesses as Abahlali. We are not proud of this, but we are humble. We know our weaknesses, and of course, having partners like CLP, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, there's a number of them, individual activists. They have actually made what Abahlali is. I would be very selfish to say Abahlali is where it is today because of its own wisdom. It is, it's because of the people who have journeyed with us, such as Chet and Paul.
Wow. Gosh, I'm glad I asked that question because what you are saying is really, really profound. The whole idea of knowing your story, knowing the people that you lead. Because again, sometimes there's a danger in the sense that leaders themselves want to do things by themselves and leaving the people that they are leading behind. And I actually think that's actually quite important for both those that are involved in these daily struggles and those that want to stand in solidarity. I think I want to actually leave the conversation with the two of you here and allow other people as well to come in. Perhaps, you've raised a lot of important things that I'm sure all of us are taking away here. We'll be taking away from this conversation. So I don't know. Can I invite the participants in the conversation perhaps to ask a few questions of clarity to David and Sbu? You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. These are just questions of clarity, and then we'll have our own conversation later.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ashley.
What I didn't pick up very specifically, I liked the what do you call it, the learnings that David and Sbu both articulated. But I would be curious to hear what exactly did CLP do? So
okay.
there were the evictions happening, the assault on the community. CLP couldn't sit by. What exactly was the intervention? So what form did the solidarity work take?
Okay. Can we take another question? Is there any other question that you have? Okay, whilst people are still thinking, David, perhaps you could just come in so we don't waste this time and just explain, like in these past 3 months, when the Czech dollars were under siege, what did you do to show solidarity? You are on mute, Dav. Unmute yourself, David. David, you are on mute. Whilst David is unmuting himself, I see that there is a question on the chat. How do how do you get solidarity from other organizations without taking away from the people? How have you managed to form these relationships and keep them alive within the same vision that you have as the organizations? So I think that's a question from Imameleng to both you, Sbu, and David.
Okay. First, let me deal with the question that Ashley raised. So, in the 3 months of lockdown, from the 27th of March to now, mid-May, we could not take or keep silence and just read the statements coming from Abahlali that Azania has been attacked and so many homes were demolished, or read that Ekuphumeleleni was attacked and homes were demolished, or Ekenan. We deliberated in the office and then came up with a proposal that no, we should come up with a campaign that will expose this inhumanity and brutality that eThekwini municipality is doing to these 3 settlements. Because at the moment it seems nothing, there is no sign that they are in any way ready or going to stop. It's just like daily occurrence. And we know Abahlali have a mailing service, a listserv that connects with a couple of thousands activists across the globe. And they were reporting this through this mailing service. And because we are so close to where they are and where this was happening, we said at the office, no, we can't just sit back and consume these never-ending statements on what has been happening or what is happening. We came with the idea of the campaign. Now, the campaign wanted to look at 3 things. One of them is to go directly to the settlements where these attacks were happening, to understand the scope and the magnitude of this brutality. The other thing is to understand from the point of view of the company, at least that is in the forefront of these demolitions, the Kelvin and Family Security Company. What motivates them to do this? What makes them to always be ready to go and smash someone's home? How did they, even get to work this way, or not necessarily get the tender, but what is underlining their agreement with the municipality? And the level of arrogance, even from this head of anti-land invasion unit that Sbu talked about, Mr. Mkhize. We wanted to understand that dynamic. The other thing in the campaign, we wanted to illuminate the danger and the brutality that is underneath demolitions. A lockdown is related to something as big as COVID. We wanted that to be known, that and understand. So we engaged a professor at UKZN who leads family health and whatnot, but he's the head of the health, as a head of the health center at UKZN that deals with family health, children and whatnot. And then we wanted to understand, because as Sbu kept on saying, the organization that has been supporting with litigation and whatnot, etc. So we wanted to understand also other underlying legal consequences of a thing like this, when a state is forcing people out of their homes when they are supposed to be protected by being at home. Now, this campaign then I went out to the 3 settlements and spoke to activists that have been affected, the leaders in the settlements. One of the researchers that we work with, who's a journalist, then engaged the Calvin security personnel, and then Graham engaged the health professor at UKZN. Then we pulled together this report, because what we were asking is, what are the consequences of forcing people to be out in the cold or to be out where the virus is so strong when they are supposed to be in their homes. That's one part. Second part is being left to be beaten up the way the comrades have been. What are the consequences? How is a local municipality seen in that way? Which is where we felt this is inhumanity. Therefore, the mayor must apologize for allowing this thing to happen under his leadership, and the mayor must make an undertaking that this cannot happen again. And those who were championing these illegal evictions must be taken to task, must face consequences of their actions. So these are the things we looked at as part of the campaign, whereby then we, for different sections of the report we wanted to produce, we attended to different sections. We had a report, we put it together, and then we started circulating it. We wrote a petition that is accompanying the report. We wrote a statement that is accompanying a report. The petition and the statement, we're calling on people to sign in support of Abahlali's call for the end of the eviction, to the evictions or moratorium on evictions, and also a call that the municipality must take the responsibility for what they did. So we have a report that is about 20 pages with pictures, with testimonies from people detailing actually from the first day of the lockdown, how in each settlements these evictions have been conducted, how many people who were brutalized, how many homes that were smashed, and the status of the people that were brutalized. You have children that are still crawling who are dependent on the breast milk. We have pensioners who should be in really protective or protected places, who are chronic and whatnot, who are part of being thrown out in the cold. And you have disabled people like Eken, and you have two disabled folks there who also had their homes smashed and had. And then you have the guy that's who refers to as Yamgela, him and others actually from other settlements. One of them is living with a bullet. Health practitioners are saying they cannot afford to take it out because it may lead to him being paralyzed. So you have people who, now the campaign that we came up with was able to illuminate all these things that are otherwise were not detailed.
David, unmute. And
What happened? I don't know what happened, sorry. So we thought it was going to be an important intervention to support Abahlali at this point in time by coming up with a campaign so that it can highlight and strengthen their call for the end to evictions. So as we stand now, we have in the petition over 10,000 signatures that come from ranges of places, church leaders locally and international, academics locally and international, other activists from other organizations. In Cape Town already, they are making calls to want to engage this report, because what the Abahlali in Durban are going through is what Cape Town residents in the shacks are going through, as we know, the story that we saw on TV in Buleland. Joburg, same thing. They want to engage this because they see it's a similar experience where the state cannot afford, but through in its these spheres, it's just a contradiction throughout.
thank you, David, for that. I think that's quite a good detail of what you're doing, like talking to the activists and people that were directly affected, produce the report and distributing that, and then asking people to sign a petition and you've already indicated the number of signatures that you have both local and beyond. And I'm not sure, I remember that there was a question that I had asked you about how you've used or how Abahlali have actually taken up this report, and perhaps in answering the question that was asked by Inameleng, you could also add on that, how do you get solidarity from other organizations without taking away from the people? How have you managed to form these relationships and keep them alive within the same vision that you have as the organizations?
Yes, starting with how we have actually formed this relationship with Church Land Program, I think it has been the idea that we all have our duty to God, our duty to our country, our duty to make sure the social change, social justice flourishes in this country. And also the understanding that Abahlali on their own, without the support of others, can simply not achieve all the challenges that South Africa faces, the inequalities that exist, poverty that exists, does not require, it's not the challenge that is facing Abahlali, it's facing the entire country. But also we are facing a universal challenge of humanity, where humanity is deteriorating. So many of us within the discourse of social justice, we think we have that obligation. So therefore it became very important for us to say to our members, we are facing this monster, and it's such a complicated and big monster that we cannot do any dent to it without collaborating with others. So what we had to do has been to identify allies that are strong, allies that are progressive, allies that have principles of how they want to live. So we've identified allies because we know the world is globalizing, it is globalized, and it requires one to manage the relationship. So building relationship is a must. So any individual or organization that works in silos still have a challenge. So hence Abahlali has identified, while we were identifying allies, I think within CLP's mind, the very same processes of identifying, grassroots organization that will champion the challenges that South Africa and the world faces. That's how we sort of met and converged, because we thought we have a duty, and of course with limited knowledge and resources. Now, when you combine these sort of ideas, it has built Abahlali. Hence, we have CLP on the one hand. I mean, there's a number of partners that we have, but they have been built over years. So we have built a strong foundation on the understanding that we do not always have all the answers to the questions. So anyone who agrees they do not have answers to the challenges facing South Africa and the world, they ought to identify allies and work with others. So hence it becomes possible to have this working relationship. Of course, there has been challenges over the years, but together we've managed, and the road is smooth. We know where we are heading to. But also, how does one get solidarity, from organization without taking away, from the people? So, the partnership or solidarity has to be mutual benefiting. We can be very, I would say, careless as Abahlali to think that our role is to receive solidarity. We have learned over time that we are not just a charity, we are not beggars. We have our own strength, and we should return the very same solidarity to others who need it. Hence, we are not just also asking solidarity from people to support us. we want to offer solidarity at the same time so that we do not just become burden to people, but we can be productive members of our society. So Abahlali offers solidarity not only to grassroots organizations, but also to other progressive forces. So that is to ensure that we are not just parasites who only receive and not give. So we try to balance that. And I think that's what organizations like CLP are doing. But one thing that is important that I should mention, the idea that CLP came up with has actually assisted us in a number of ways that CLP is not even aware of. So it was not just a matter of producing the report and say, what do we do with the report? CLP has their own plans about how to take this forward, but we knew that there will be expected and unexpected, outcomes or consequences of this report. And we are not surprised today that there's more than 10,000 people who have signed to, to this report. But at the same time, what it has done to us, it has actually provided us with the knowledge, the information that should be our weapon. Because how do you argue when you do not have, the knowledge that you sort of talk about? It was easy for me to talk about the extent of the trauma that children are facing. But I know also through these reports, what happens when a child goes to school and by the time you come back from school, suddenly there's no home. We've seen that we're actually affected by this. I mean, to kids now, the kids had a home this morning when she went to school. On her return to school, there is no home. This is the kind of trauma that we are going through. And of course, we want to appreciate, to see, of course, everyone that has read the report that intends to act, because there was a question, you do the report, then what? Now we've seen this report has done amazing stuff because people have acted. It was not just endorsing. Already there are proposals. Some people want to do service in communities. I mean, Bishop Robin Philip, has proposed to bring a church, service in one of the settlements, and to say the church cannot keep quiet, also in a form of a press statement. So the report forces people to speak out. That's what makes them become a better church, those who are church. And it makes people become better people when they actually act against injustices. Silence has no place in our society.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sbu and David. I actually want to hear more from the participants as well. I mean, I know that those questions were initially raised as questions to Sbu and David. But what are your own experiences? It might actually be good to also bring your own experiences. We've heard from both Sbu and David from their own experiences. What, like, as you listen to them, what are your own, what resonates with you? And it'd be good to also hear your own experiences, even including in response to that question that was posed by Inameleng of how do you work in solidarity without taking from other people. Can we hear from you, your own experiences, and what resonated with you as you listened to Sbu and David?
Hi, Susanna. So here's my okay. Oh, the second thing again. I wanted to know, how do we access the reports? Because I hear that you mentioning the speakers keep mentioning reports. Where do you access the reports that you're mentioning? And then if there are reports that are in progress already, or research that's in progress already, how do we know as well about that? So I live in Ekhayelitsha, and I actually did highlight the story of Mbolweni, the first evictions during around the beginning of April. So, and that was shared with the impact of women. How women are impacted in these elections and so on. So that so far has been my so on, but especially looking at women and children, basically. So yeah, that's just been my experience. So hence I'm asking, how do we actually get these organizations or find these organizations that say they for solidarity, and how do they actually engage with people taking activity experience?
Thank you, Mamileng. Is there anybody else who wants to add their own views? And you can also write on the chat if you feel like you want to write instead of speaking up. But I would really love to hear as you, and what are your own experiences?
Hi, Timbela. Maybe a slightly different phrasing for the question. In your role as a member of an activist organization, how do you expect solidarity to be expressed when you work with others? Spoo was quite clear about the need for speak out when people out to walk alongside the organization. In your experience, are there any other things that you would add to that list, or what else is there, if anything, an activist organization? Maybe if we, hi Melody.
Yes, I was thinking that as usually as Zimbabwe Council of Churches, we usually look into the fact that as we provide solidarity, we need to observe the do no harm principle, so that the community or the people that you are providing the solidarity to are not harmed in any way with the solidarity that you're giving to them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Neil, Tammy.
Can I ask one last question again? Is there a way of tracking all of this, the progress as well? Like, for an example, the situation that's been happening here in Kenya, and then let's say you bring in solidarity, right, or whatever ways that you coming in to help with and so on. So how are you able to track if things are working or they're not working, or how do you build capacity in the space as well? And as you mentioned, solidarity.
Maybe a reflection from yourself, Spoo, as to how this is connecting up with other struggles. So we've spoken specifically about Abahlali, but are there other movements, are there other groups that you're also talking to and sharing information, national voice, if anything is?
Thank you for that. I'm very sorry. I Imam she was cutting. But yes, we are working to, so we're disturbed by the minister's hypocrisy when, or because Cape Town happens to be a DA-run municipality, when her comrades in other metros are doing the same, to the extent of the attempted. We've never seen a solidarity statement from the minister. She's never offered any legal, support to Abahlali, despite having lost so many members. And of course, so immediately the 4 officers were immediately suspended. We want to invite our comrades also in Cape Town to say we should all demand justice for Bulelani Xolani and all other activists who have lost their lives in the hands of the state. So we have that responsibility. But I do want to say that if grassroots organizations are not as strong as they should be and strategic as they should be, it becomes difficult for supporting organizations. If you want to do solidarity work, if people aren't organized, if the very same solidarity will create division and weaken organization, it's another difficult scenario altogether. So I do want to say these are not easy questions. We've been through it for a very long time. You may want to extend solidarity, but sometimes you don't know how, because those that you want to support don't know how to receive you as well, and they don't know what solidarity should look like. Hence, it's important that we have also, as grassroots activists, have a conversation amongst ourselves to say, what does solidarity look like? What is solidarity in actual fact that is meaningful to the people who actually need that support? So that it's easy for people who do support, but they do not know how, and end up unintentionally weakening the very same voice that they should be, helping amplifying.
Useful. Are there any reflections on Spoo's question around what should solidarity look like from an organizational perspective?
If I may, technically I'm supposed to be a bit of a quiet observer of things, but I think I'm always curious about how organizations that are social justice organizations, how they practically, and maybe David and Spoo can share on this and others as well if they've got experience. Every year you plan your work plan, you say you're going to do A, B, C, D, E. You don't predict that there's going to be an onslaught on communities by the state, or you don't predict that there will be instances of injustice that arise in the year. How do you reconcile being responsive to the voice of communities with the fact that you've got all these activities that you plan every year that justify your existence? I'd be curious to hear people's reflections on that. I'm sure people, Lawrence in Zimbabwe, Imam Maleng in Kailicha, Melody in the Council of Churches, Tami in Soweto, I'm sure you all come across situations where there's a crisis in your community now, but your organization has got limited resources. It's got this. I'm curious to hear, how do you stand in solidarity with people in those instances? And it doesn't just have to be David, it can be other people from other parts of the country or the region.
So with me, being based in Cape Town, because I work in the sexual and reproductive health space, the way we do solidarity is to amplify or use social media platforms to actually share what the organization that we're supporting, whether they're doing campaigns or social media chats or whatever. So we share solidarity or provide solidarity in that way if we do not have funds specifically to support the cause or whatever, but we actually figure out ways on how we can use our own platforms for social media to amplify their cause, and that's so far being it. And besides, like writing articles for healthy news, like those are the things, we do or support to support other organizations' activities in terms of solidarity and so on.
So I think what Imam Maleng is saying is actually working within the limitations of their own budgets and also what they're already doing. It would be good to hear from other people as well, so that it doesn't look like this is a conversation for Imam Maleng and Ashley.
Lawrence has his hand raised. Lawrence, I think you
Hello,
can go.
Everyone. All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me loudly?
Yes, we can, Lawrence.
Thank you. I've just observed that most of the African governments have got this tendency, have got this negative tendency over the activists. But for us to have that solidarity assimilate into our own communities, we need to work along their governmental policies. Every policy has got a loophole, and that loophole, it might be that which might give us that majority vote. So what we need as activists, I think we should always, when we are having any active program, we should always look into their policies, how we can work together with them. Otherwise, we are going to have another generation of manslaughters on activism. Thank you.
Lawrence, are you saying you need to work together with government by identifying loopholes within their own policies? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Most of what the government needs is for us to observe their their presence. So the only way we can observe their presence is when we are working along towards their policies. We might have a sudden shift in some of our maybe annual programs, but working along their policies, it might give us a more ground to approach our community without worrying about a manslaughter. That's what I think.
Okay, I would be keen to hear what others think of that suggestion from Lawrence. I think the bigger question for me is whether you can actually trust government. So, for instance, if you think about what we've had today, is that in the case of Abahlali, is that you have one arm of the state saying one thing, and then you have another one saying another thing. But also, I think what Sbu was also raising later on was the level of hypocrisy, where one minister, because she is in the ANC, when the onslaught is happening in a province where the ANC is not leading, she speaks up. And in the areas where the ANC is leading, she's not able to do the same. So I don't know how other people feel about what Lawrence is saying. It's just a conversation. Can we hear other voices? And perhaps as you are trying to respond to that, can I also perhaps throw a last question to the participants? So again, what are the lessons that we need to take from today's conversation when you talk about standing in solidarity with people that are involved in daily struggles? Each of us are involved in one kind of an activity or work wherever we are. So what are the lessons that you are taking from today's conversations in terms of standing in solidarity or perhaps receiving solidarity? I think that's a question that all of us can actually answer. Go ahead, Tammy.
But
Tammy, we have not heard what you said. Can you start from the beginning?
Tembele, I don't think we can hear Tammy. I'm not sure if we can.
Yeah, yes. Perhaps Tammy can write on the chat because we can't hear you. Is there anyone else who wants to say something before I hand over to Alan to summarize for us? What are the lessons? I would love to hear what people are taking away from what they've had today. At least if we can hear two people who are saying, this is what I'm taking that I think I can apply in my own practice.
Hello.
Yes, yes, Jerry.
The lessons that we have drawn from this meeting, in terms of solidarity, I think solidarity, what I've learned is solidarity must be of mutual respect, mutual benefit, and should not be imposed. That means the two partners that give each other support must have a clear understanding of each other's program. So one partner must not impose on the other. But it is also a platform where we share experiences, we share the knowledge, and also agree as to how do we go forward. But again, I want to talk to the issue of trust Can we trust the government? In my experience, in the experience of the organization that I'm working for, I think what is happening is it is not a mistake what the government is doing. It is a deliberate act. So as activists, we need to clearly have an understanding as to what is the program of the government. What does this government say? What is who is their master? It is not a mistake that we have black people as a group are holding the short end of the stick. It is not a mistake that black people today, under this lockdown, are the only group who are suffering from poverty. People do not have food. It is not a mistake. It is something that is deliberate because our government serves the master, and the master is capitalism. And the government, for it to let down the communities, to take an offense or take an offensive attack on the people here, it is not a mistake, it is deliberate. Then how do we begin to trust such government? I think that is my take on the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. It was very helpful. Any other person who wants to throw some ideas? We are almost finishing the session. It's very important what you're saying there, Jerry, that because I mean, it goes back to the question that I had raised right at the beginning when I think David was speaking, to say what can we read from what we are seeing here. And I think you're raising a very important thing that we shouldn't take for granted what is actually happening. So it's important for us to understand what is the agenda behind what we're actually seeing, who's holding the key. That you should have a government that is working against its own people. Last thoughts? Perhaps we could also invite David and Smoot to throw their last thoughts there, and then I hand over to Alan to summarize what he has had.
Well, mine is to actually thank the platform because for us it's really important and it's working. Also to thank Church and Program for such a thoughtful approach to here. It's actually going to go beyond what we are doing already when you have more than 10,000 people attaching their signatories. It speaks volume to us because it says the world cannot be silenced and the world must know what kind of government we have. And therefore, it will also speak to the electorate, the choices that we make, because sometimes we get blamed. When we go overseas, we get asked, but who vote for people that you are complaining about today? And it's us, the same people. But then we are saying we all have a duty not to keep quiet when things are falling apart. All raise our hands and say, this is wrong. So my message is to say, anything that is wrong, we got to say, but this is wrong. We may not should say, but this is
Okay. From my side, maybe the last thing will be what we've seen in the 3 months is that when lockdown was pronounced as a way of preventing the spread of the virus to the extent that it could have without the lockdown, has somewhat been used by some organs of the state to criminalize the poor, so that you can, at the end, not even at the end, during the course of lockdown, you've lost more than 10 lives in the hands of security forces that are meant to protect the poor. In the course of lockdown, you have so many homes, over 900 families displaced and have their homes demolished in the hands of people who are supposed to be protecting them. So lockdown, as a response to fighting this health issue and work socially with people to prevent an epidemic, has become the very thing that has been used to terrorize the people. So we have a military state. So many utterances from the Minister of Police would attest to that. I don't need to quote him. So our role as CLP, which then was the focus also of the campaign, was to see to it that when people seek to have their own shelter in places that they know they are meant to be where they live, are not criminalized. So the report, part of its function was to decriminalize this struggle to have a home, the struggle to be a normal family, the struggle to be a Black person in your own country. That will be my last contribution.
Alan, thank you, David, and Sbu. Alan, please.
Thank you, Timbela. So a slightly different summary than I would normally do. So I'm not going to focus too much on the individual content, but to talk about what is a strong message that has come through in this conversation. I think central to the conversation is the idea that at the moment, our humanity is under attack. And that we are facing very, very difficult times in which the people who are supposed to be defenders of our freedoms, the people who are supposed to enable our communities to grow and thrive, are the very people who are attacking us, the people and institutions. And that in this time, if you call yourself a social justice practitioner, you have no other option but to respond. You have to act to make this visible. And a deep recognition in this conversation is that we can't do it alone, that it's necessary that we start acting in solidarity with each other in order to address some of these issues. No single organization has all of the answers. No single individual has the capacity and access and ability to generate the kind of energy that we need to resist what is happening at this point in time. And so solidarity becomes a critical thing. Solidarity becomes the thing. Our ability to act with and for each other to amplify our individual struggles, and in so doing, trying to create the change that we want to see in the world. But there's certain demands on us if we're going to act in solidarity that were quite nicely articulated by people who spoke today. That it must be respectful, it must be honest, and it must be built on principle, on a common set of values and ideas that we all share, that we act out of a common and a mechanism for building solidarity. There isn't a formula, as David said. There isn't a book that we can go to. There isn't a that froze a bit there, so I paused. There isn't a manual to follow. Solidarity is built on trust and on relationships that are bound in listening and acting and learning and fighting sometimes, disagreeing. But it's a relationship like every other relationship that we have to engage in if we want to create any kind of change. An important thing to remember is that these actions have to be led by those who are experiencing the struggle. As David put it, we are not leaders of the struggle. We do not have the sleepless nights. So we have to be led by the needs and experiences of those experiencing the challenge. So in that act of solidarity always has to be informed by the people who are actually walking the talk. The people who, with or without our organizations, have to rise up, have so it becomes really, really important that it's that experience that's front and center. Our role in that solidarity action is to bring our own particular skills, experiences, resources, connect, and to try to amplify the voice of people who are experiencing that struggle. It was put quite nicely that it's the same voices, it's the same people, only louder and in more places. And our role is to sit, I'm not going to speak generally about everybody's role, but it's a voice to get more people would listen. Closing statement, one that I found justice. There's no place for silence in our society. It's a call for us to all act and speak out and to engage with the challenges that we see of all of the people in our society who are experiencing injustice. And that's where I'll wrap up, and hopefully you found that useful. Thank you. Back to you, Tembela.
I was going to ask you, Alan, to also read this. I think there's a comment from Tammy. Is it Tammy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's written by Solidarity Hub. Yeah.
Okay. So Tammy's just made an input, and she says she struggled with the internet, and her response to the question around trusting government is as follows. We can't trust the government as long as we have people that treat our communities with the same strategy that was used before democracy. I believe, my Zulu is really terrible.
Yeah, so Abaxoka Sibambe, I think it's referring to the previous government.
Okay. So that's an input from Tammy before she dropped again. Maybe it's a conversation for another hub where we talk about our relationship with the state. We won't open up again with that one.
Yeah, I actually think it's an important one. I think on my side, thank you so much, Alan, for that summary. It's a real, I think it's a real call for all of us to do something, but also, like as you say, it's also how we actually work together in respect of people who are involved in struggles. And I also see that Lawrence has got a comment there, and he's saying, as far as activism is concerned, the government is more of a patient in a rehabilitation facility, and we are the healers of the community because they are part of the community. We need to find more favorable ways to address voices when we face the government. Otherwise, they will continue viewing us as a virus that need to be eliminated, thus to only become but a threat to them. Our losses and progress matters because a negative signal of loss of hope might dissolve our solidarity progress. I don't know, progress to community. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so much, Lawrence, for that. And thank you, Sue and David, for that important input that you have made today. You actually make me to want to leave what I'm doing. And I think for me, part of this conversation has been that whole thing of awakening something in me to actually remind me that, I might be sitting in my comfortable corner, but the world is much bigger than that, and it actually demands all of us to do something, to speak up when things are not going well, and to actually find ways of really standing in solidarity in practical ways, because it's very easy for a lot of us to just shout on social media and think that's enough, but there's actually much more work that needs to be done out there. Thank you so much for making the time today and for all of that input. Yeah, that's it for me. And thanks everyone for participating in the conversation today. I am hoping that you actually got something out of today.